He looked at my faded jeans and decided I didn't belong in his hardware store. He didn't know that by tomorrow morning I would own it. The smell of old wood, rust, and that faint, metallic tang of machine oil always reminded me of my grandpa's workshop. It's a scent of creation, of fixing things, of potential. That's what I was thinking when I pushed open the glass door of Henderson's Hardware, a bell above it announcing my arrival with a cheerful, yet slightly tinny jingle. It was the kind of local, family-owned place that was becoming a relic, a holdout against the giant, impersonal home improvement warehouses. I'd just bought a beautiful old Victorian house on the other side of town, and I was determined to support the local businesses as I restored it. I was dressed for a day of unpacking boxes, not for impressing anyone. Faded jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and a pair of scuffed work boots. My goal was simple. Find a very specific type of antique-style brass hinge for the built-in library cabinets. A small detail, but one I was excited about. The man behind the counter didn't seem to share my nostalgia or excitement. He was probably in his late 60s, with a sour, downturned mouth and thinning gray hair, combed meticulously over a shiny scalp. A small embroidered name tag on his dusty blue work vest read, M. Henderson, Prop. He watched me walk in, and his eyes, a pale, watery blue, didn't so much greet me as they did assess me. They scanned me from head to toe, and the initial, faint hint of a customer service smile curdled and vanished. He folded his arms across his chest and just stared. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was having a bad day. I offered a friendly nod. "Afternoon," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet store. He grunted in response, a sound somewhere between a cough and a sigh of annoyance. "Okay, not a people person. I can work with that." I started browsing the aisles, the wooden floorboards creaking under my weight. The place was a maze of nuts, bolts, pipes, and tools, organized with a logic that was probably only clear to Mr. Henderson himself. After a few minutes of fruitless searching, I decided to just ask the expert. I walked back to the counter. He hadn't moved an inch, his gaze following me like I was a hawk circling his chickens. "Excuse me," I started politely. "I'm looking for a specific item. Brass butterfly hinges, about 1.5 inches. For cabinets." He squinted at me, his lips pursed into a thin line. "Don't have 'em." The words were clipped. Final. He didn't check a computer, didn't look at a catalog, didn't even turn his head. "Oh," I said, a little taken aback. "Are you sure? I saw on your store's website that you stocked them. That's why I came all the way over here." A flicker of something dark crossed his face. "Website's wrong," he snapped. "Now, is there anything you're actually going to buy? Or are you just here to browse?" The implication was thick and ugly. He wasn't seeing a potential customer. He was seeing a loiterer. A problem. My patience, usually a deep well, started to feel a little shallower. "Well, I was going to buy the hinges," I said, keeping my tone even. "And probably a few other things, too. I'm restoring a house nearby." He actually scoffed. A short, sharp, dismissive sound. "A house? Right. Listen, son, this is a specialty store. We sell high-quality hardware. It's expensive. Maybe the big box store down the highway would be more your speed." And there it was. It wasn't about my clothes. It wasn't about me browsing. It was about him looking at my black skin and deciding I didn't belong. Deciding I couldn't afford his high-quality hardware. Deciding I wasn't worthy of being in his dusty little kingdom. A familiar hot anger started to prickle at the back of my neck, but I pushed it down. Getting angry wouldn't solve anything. It would only prove his ugly stereotype right. Instead, a cold, sharp clarity settled over me. "With all due respect, sir," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I know exactly what it costs. And I'd like to buy it from you. So, could you please just check for me?" That was the last straw for him. He slammed a weathered hand down on the counter, making a jar of screws jump. "I said we don't have it. Now get out of my store. I don't want your kind in here causing trouble. Go on, get out before I call the cops." His voice was raised now, a raspy, furious yell that shattered the dusty silence. An elderly white woman who had been looking at paint swatches in the corner froze, her eyes wide, before she quickly busied herself, pretending she hadn't heard a thing. My jaw tightened. "Your kind?" I repeated, my voice low. "And what kind is that, Mr. Henderson? People who want to buy hinges?" "You know damn well what kind," he snarled, jabbing a trembling finger towards the door. "Out, now." I stood there for a long moment, just looking at him, at the pure, unadulterated hate in his eyes. I could argue, I could yell, I could make a scene, but I realized in that instant that a much better, much more satisfying option had just presented itself. Slowly, deliberately, I turned my back to him. I walked to the door, the bell jingling mockingly as I pushed it open. I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, and he shouted one last thing after me. "And don't you ever come back." I stopped on the sidewalk. I didn't look back at him. Instead, I lifted my gaze to the faded, hand-painted sign above the door. Henderson's Hardware. Then I glanced at the building itself, the brickwork, the large display windows, the roofline. I took a slow, deep breath, not of anger but of anticipation. I finally turned, just enough to meet his glare through the glass. He had a triumphant, ugly smirk on his face. My expression remained perfectly neutral, but I pulled out my phone. I didn't raise it to record him. I simply unlocked it, opened my calendar, and made a new entry for 9 a.m. the next morning. The title was just 2 words. I put my phone back in my pocket, looked him dead in the eye through the glass, and gave him a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That night I didn't sleep at the Victorian house. I slept in my downtown penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The anger from the afternoon had cooled, solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. Mr. Henderson had made a judgment about me based on the color of my skin and a pair of old jeans. He assumed I was poor, powerless, and transient. He was about to learn that my work clothes are for building things up, and my business suits are for tearing things down. The next morning, I bypassed the jeans and hoodie. I chose a charcoal gray, tailor-made suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie the color of steel. I slipped on a watch that cost more than most used cars, and polished a pair of black Italian leather shoes until I could see my own determined reflection in them. I wasn't dressing for a fight. I was dressing for a closing. My 9 p.m. appointment wasn't a complaint to the Better Business Bureau. It was a meeting with Sarah, my commercial real estate agent, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. She had a stack of documents waiting for me, and a wide professional smile. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, gesturing to the chair. "You were certainly motivated on this one. I've never had a client identify a property and want to make an offer within the same hour. Let's just say I was inspired by the vintage charm," I said, my voice smooth and even. "How did the owners respond?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "They were ecstatic. Your all-cash offer was 20% over their quiet asking price. They couldn't sign the papers fast enough. As of 8:45 this morning, you are the sole owner of the commercial property located at 412 Elm Street." She pushed a thick portfolio across the polished table. "Congratulations. You bought a hardware store." I opened the portfolio. Inside were deeds, titles, and property reports, but I was only looking for one specific document. I found it tucked in the back. The lease agreement for the building's single tenant, Henderson's Hardware. "And the lease?" I asked, scanning the page. "Just as you suspected from the public records," Sarah confirmed. "His long-term lease expired over a decade ago. The previous owner, a friend of his, let him stay on a month-to-month tenancy. Sentimental old fool. Legally speaking, Marcus, you can give him a 30-day notice to vacate for any reason you see fit. Or no reason at all." A slow, cold smile finally touched my lips. "Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. You've been a great help." "My pleasure," she said, packing up her own briefcase. So, what are your plans for the place? Tear it down and build condos? Something like that, I said, standing up and straightening my tie. First, I think I need to have a little chat with the current tenant, introduce myself as the new landlord. An hour later, I wasn't in my usual pickup truck. I was behind the wheel of my sleek black Tesla, the electric engine humming silently as I pulled up across the street from Henderson's Hardware. I parked and just watched for a moment. There he was, Mr. Henderson himself, sweeping the sidewalk in front of his store with a kind of smug satisfaction, the morning sun glinting off his shiny scalp. He looked perfectly content in his little kingdom of rust and prejudice. He hadn't given our encounter a second thought, I was sure of it. To him I was just another piece of trash he'd swept out of his life. I took the portfolio from the passenger seat. My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a man he wouldn't recognize. The calm, composed CEO stared back, not the guy in the dusty hoodie he had screamed at yesterday. I took a deep breath, the anger now completely gone, replaced by an icy sense of purpose. Karma, I thought, isn't some cosmic force. Sometimes it wears a suit and carries a briefcase. I got out of the car, the expensive leather of my shoes clicking softly on the asphalt. I saw his head pop up, his eyes narrowing as he took in the expensive car that had just parked in front of his humble little shop. He watched, broom held loosely in his hand, as I closed the door with a quiet, solid thud. He couldn't see my face clearly yet, but his posture shifted. His curiosity was piqued. He probably thought I was a salesman or some developer looking to buy the bakery next door. He had no idea. I straightened my jacket, holding the portfolio firmly in my left hand. Then I stepped off the curb and started walking across the street, my path aimed directly at him. The morning traffic was light, and as I drew closer, I saw the exact moment recognition dawned on his face. His jaw went slack. The smug satisfaction evaporated, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. His watery blue eyes widened in disbelief, darting from my polished shoes to my tailored suit, to the expensive watch on my wrist, and finally to my face, the face of the man he'd called your kind, and threatened with the police less than 24 hours ago. He stood there, frozen, the broom slipping from his trembling fingers and clattering onto the sidewalk. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The cheerful little bell above his door was about to ring, and this time I wasn't here to ask for anything. I was here to collect. I stopped directly in front of him on the sidewalk, the fallen broom lying between us like a line drawn in the sand. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply held his stunned, panicked gaze. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. "You," he finally croaked, his voice a dry, raspy whisper. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "What? What do you want?" I allowed myself a small, humorless smile. "You told me yesterday never to come back," I said, my voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to his spittle-flecked rage from the day before. "But you see, there's been a change of ownership, of the building. So I guess you could say, I own the welcome mat now." I held up the portfolio. The name of my investment firm was embossed in gold lettering on the front. His eyes flickered down to it, then back up to my face. The color drained from his already pale cheeks. The pieces were clicking into place in his mind, and the picture they were forming was one of utter ruin. "No," he stammered, shaking his head in denial. "The Hendersons have been in this building for 70 years. Old man Crowley would never sell. Not to you." The slur was left unspoken, but it hung in the air between us, as ugly and tangible as it had been yesterday. "Old man Crowley," I said, letting the portfolio fall to my side, "was more than happy to sell when presented with an all-cash offer for 20% above market value. He's probably on a beach in Florida right now, signing the final papers. Business is business, Mr. Henderson." I stepped over his broom and walked to the front door, pushing it open. The little bell jingled, a sound that now seemed to signal a final judgment. I walked behind his sacred counter, the very spot where he had stood and condemned me, and ran a hand over the dusty, worn wood. It was mine now. He stumbled in after me, his face a mask of desperation and dawning horror. "You can't do this," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "This store, it's my life. It was my father's life, my grandfather's. It's all I have." I turned to face him, leaning back against the counter, crossing my arms. I let him see the cold, hard emptiness in my eyes. "You had a choice, Mr. Henderson. Yesterday, a man walked into your store. He was a potential customer. He was a neighbor. He was restoring a piece of this town's history, and he wanted your help. He wanted to give you his business, to support you. And what did you do? You judged him. You belittled him. You threw him out based on nothing more than the color of his skin." Tears welled in his watery eyes. I made a mistake," he stammered. "I'm sorry. Please, I'll get you those hinges. Free of charge." The offer was so pathetic, so small in the face of what he'd done, that I almost laughed. "This isn't about hinges anymore, Mr. Henderson. This is about consequences. You built your life in this little kingdom, judging everyone who walked through that door. You decided who was worthy and who wasn't. Now, it's my turn to decide." I opened the portfolio and pulled out a single crisp sheet of paper and a pen. I slid them across the counter towards him. It was an official notice to vacate the premises. "You have 30 days, I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Your month-to-month tenancy is terminated. I suggest you use that time to clear out your inventory and personal belongings. On the 31st day, the locks will be changed." He stared at the paper as if it were a death sentence. He looked up at me, his face crumpled in supplication. "Please, son, don't do this. I'll do anything." The word "son" dripped with a desperate false familiarity that turned my stomach. "You had your chance to treat me like a person," I said softly. "You failed. Now you'll treat me like your landlord." I pushed myself off the counter and walked towards the door. I had one last thing to do. As I reached the entrance, I turned back to him. He was still standing there, a broken old man in a dying store, staring at the piece of paper that had just dismantled his entire world. "By the way," I said, pausing with my hand on the door, "my name is Marcus Thorne. I'm the founder and CEO of Thorne Development Group. The Victorian I'm restoring? It's the old Miller Mansion on the hill. I bought it last month. I'm not just passing through, Mr. Henderson. I'm your new neighbor." I let that sink in. I let him picture me, the man he threw out of his store, living in the grandest house in town, presiding over the future of the very block his family had occupied for generations. Then I walked out. The bell above the door gave one last, final jingle. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The street was quiet, my car was waiting, and in 30 days, demolition would begin. I was going to tear down this old, crumbling building full of rust and hate, and in its place I was going to build something new. Something better. Something everyone was welcome in.